See, record. All right, so here we go. Thank you guys for joining me this morning. I know you guys are working on curriculum writing, and so I'm going to go over just a few things with you guys, some series that I recommend you check out for each one of the grade levels and kind of give you some background behind those. I'm going to move rather quickly because I know we only have about 30 minutes here, and I know you guys have a lot of work to do. So let's dive in. I'm Jason Eilenfeld. Hold on one second, let me turn that off. I'm Jason Eilenfeld. I'm with Social Studies School Service and Active Classroom. Um, and what we've got here for you guys, it seems like you guys already know how to navigate the program. But just to kind of go over a couple of things, if you guys need some help along the way, you get stuck, you forget how to do things, you can always refer to this little question mark up here on the top right-hand side of the screen. It has user guides for both teachers and for students. The students will only see the student guide and the students will only see the student help videos, but there are plenty of help tutorials over here, as well as courses that you can launch. If you wanted to do the professional learning here, we offer those courses, of course, at no charge. And we do have an instructor that will communicate with you throughout that. Okay, so just wanted to go over those couple of things. And now we're going to dive in. You guys are probably already familiar. Do you guys see these curriculum maps down here on the bottom left-hand side of the screen? Do you guys have curriculum maps? Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure those were in your license. You can always refer to those. So what we did was we took the TEKS and we broke everything into different units, and then we kind of curated and chose activities that we suggested for each course, and it should list day by day the TEKS that are being addressed and some teaching notes on how to do that. That's just kind of a guide for teachers that maybe are new and need some type of guide for how to get through the program and what activities to use. But it's not it. It's just some recommended ones we had based on the TEKS. All right, most importantly, we're going to go into the activities over here to search this way. As you guys are probably familiar, there's several ways to search. You can search by keyword. You can search by TEKS right here. So you can actually select your grade level and select the 2018 adopted TEKS to search that way. But for today, I'm going to focus more on the advanced button over here because I wanted to talk about some series that I thought would be really good for you guys to kind of show you. I know Bobby had mentioned to me that you guys didn't want just a textbook, so you wanted some activities and things like that that were more geared for high level rigor and kind of tackling some tougher things. So what I wanted to show you guys about this advanced button, there is of course the search by subject, and I recommend that for probably US history, but geography and Texas history, I don't generally use that because I think there are a lot of other things that don't necessarily fall under that fit very well and are more engaging activities, I think, for those courses that for some reason are not pulled under there. Then there's era and theme. You can do that as well. But I like to go to the series title right here, and we're going to talk about this. So you guys notice on the left-hand side, you've got an icon and then a grouping of words. It says acting history plays, and you'll see that repeat all the way down here. And then you have the content of the topic, which is the Alamo for this one. That is because this first grouping of words before the colon is the series title. So if you find something that's really interesting, I recommend you look at the name of the series title, and then you go over here to the advanced button. You'll click on advanced, select series title, and then go find more activities like that. And we'll talk about that. So I'm going to start with world geography. And so what I did was I went through and I pulled up a few different ones. And the first one I did was mapping our world. So mapping our world is a much more hands-on approach to getting students to kind of dig into this. You can notice the way that they're arranged. It starts off with a close reading for every unit. Then there are several activities that are all going to be these hands-on activities that the kids are going to complete online, but manipulating maps. And then there are quick writes. So you've got writing prompts, a quiz. The quiz really is comprehensive. It just goes over, it's a really short quiz that covers all of the different activities. So you'd have to complete all of them if you launch the quiz. And then there's a research presentation project to close out each unit. So what I really like about these are just the hands-on nature of things. So I'm going to open up this one right here and show you guys this one on the Amazon rainforest. So this one here has step-by-step instructions over here on the right-hand side, and the kids will follow along reading the instructions. They'll use the toolbox here at the bottom to add the symbols onto the map and go through that way. What I really like about these is it's not just like a simple, here's an outline map, fill in, the continents and names of the countries and capital cities and stuff like that. Instead, they are learning about the political geography, but they're also learning about the physical environment and some of those interactions here. So as the students work through this, they learn about how the Amazon rainforest is being deforested. So what are some of the things that contribute to deforestation? And all of those icons down here have specific things for them to mark on there. So you can be talking about, the yearly harvest here and some of the things that come from there. And then it gets into the effects of deforestation. There's a shrinking rainforest map. It talks about the Trans-Amazon Highway. So that highway being built is contributing to the deforestation. Then it has the students mark up some things on here, placing the highway stamp on, and then it goes into slash and burn farming. So it kind of talks about all of those different things that contribute to it. So rather than just saying, okay, well, this is deforestation, the kids are learning about why these things take place, where they take place, and kind of how they have that impact on there. So these are really good kind of hands-on activities. If you just want the kids to do something a little bit different, they're learning about kind of that integrated geography, but also understanding the human environment impact. And there are several of those if you search for the Mapping Our World. The next one I'm going to jump over to is a series called Hungry Planet. Now, Hungry Planet, again, you find it over in the advanced series title, and you go down to the H's for Hungry Planet. What I like about these is that students are going to be analyzing culture based on what a family consumes during the course of a week. And so what these have is they have a map that kind of introduces the region, the area that they're going to be talking about, and then you have the family. When you click on the family, there are going to be questions down below for the students to analyze the image that's here above. So they can take it to full screen. They can use the magnifying tool to look for details and look at what the families eat. And then I like how you can do these comparisons side by side. So we can compare that family in Guatemala versus the family in Germany. And we can see that you have more processed foods, definitely a different diet, different style of home. You can really glean a lot of things from that. This is very much that inquiry approach. So we want students doing the investigation. There's room here for discussion questions. So you guys to have a class discussion after the students analyze this at first themselves. There's some short readings that accompany these, and then some inferencing questions to kind of close it out here at the end. So Hungry Planet's a great series. There's a wonderful culminating activity for Hungry Planet called Compare and Contrast. And that one right here kind of goes into some of those bigger concepts like life expectancy in males, life expectancy, obesity, cost of food, different comparisons, store-bought versus farm and food groups. So far I've mentioned Hungry Planet, the Mapping Our World series, and the next one I'm going to get into for world geography is something called the Desk Atlas. The Desk Atlas is kind of an assessment tool, but new learning can definitely take place with these. These are going to be interactive activities. So you can see here, if I choose to hide the answers, you have things like where the students have these drop-down menus. These are probably things that you're seeing on the new STAR test and end of course exam. So getting practice with these types of things. There are some basic, multiple choice here. There's some multiple select, which is something that is new to the STAR and EOC. So the kids have practice with those. They can enlarge the maps, look at those, and there's more information. So they're doing some comparisons and some higher order thinking takes place. This one here just takes a short reading passage and the kids answer true and false. So you've got different levels of questions in here, but you definitely have some areas where there's some higher order thinking with these. So here we're looking at grain production, and then the students will reorganize these. So the Desk Atlas is yet another series that you can find by going to the search by series. The next one I wanted to talk about for world geography is something called cultural conflicts. These are simulations. If you like to try out simulations in your classes. I really enjoy these. I think you can get some really good discussions coming out of these. But the way this is framed and set up, there's a short little background information on understanding post-colonial Africa here. And then we have our scenarios. So we look at the background information, and then there's a scenario so the kids understand what they're going to do as they play a role in this simulation here. And so then what I generally do, and I've seen teachers do this, I've been in sessions where teachers have presented this. And so they'll maybe put, 2 or 3 kids into a group to be Josiah or Okut. And so then you have kids kind of working together, thinking about how this person is going to speak and communicate in this particular scenario. And then the kids can kind of take some time and formulate, well, how would my character react based on their background information? So it's just a little bit of background information, but it's really putting the heavy lifting on the kids to really think about how it's going to play out. And there's some great ones in there, like one on the caste system, one on corporate Japan. So the corporate culture there in Japan and families in Japan. And several of those that are really neat. And again, you find those by searching for cultural conflicts. I always like to pair these up with another reading. So I just grabbed this one, and Exploring World History is just a good one because it has a lot of just short little readings and some map activities. They are a little bit on the lower end, but if you have kids that struggle with reading, these might be some good ones to do. But also they're just really good for short little case studies here. The reason I selected this one is because the cultural conflicts over here has to do with Zimbabwe. And so this one here gives the students a little bit of background on Zimbabwe. It talks about Robert Mugabe and how they changed from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe. So I like to pair some of those things up, and I just wanted to mention some of those and throw those out there. Any questions for me before I move on to 8th grade US history? How are we doing over here? Okay, the video's minimized. We good?
I really like those for geography. That
Nice.
kind of, certainly it takes some topics that we cover and kind of shifts them around. So that's really good.
So the other thing I would recommend, there's another series called Material World, which is similar to Hungry Planet, but it analyzes culture based on what people own.
Yeah. And we use the pictures for Hungry Planet, and we use the pictures for Material World, but we just don't have the computer version of that. Does that make sense?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So you'll have
So
the curriculum.
So we know exactly what you're talking about there, but this is just a little bit more interactive.
Okay.
And it just changes it up.
Cool. Well, hopefully that was helpful for world geography. And so I'm going to move on to a couple for U.S. history. The U.S. history, really, there is so much in this program for U.S. history, and likewise, you can pull in a lot of things for Texas history from the U.S. history. But I'm going to focus specifically on some Texas things here in a minute. So some things that I'm going to highlight and point to, I'm not going to spend time in it, but the Atlas of U.S. History has level 1 and level 2 activities. So like you guys saw with the desk atlas, the level 2 activities under Atlas of US History, you might want to make a note. I don't know if you guys are writing these down, these different series to recommend, but the Atlas of US History has some short little, the level 2 are like those interactive ones. So you can give those kids some practice with STAR assessment ahead of time to kind of give them some of those things. Going through this next series, I absolutely love the C3 inquiry. There's a really good one for Texas history. I'm going to just show you guys the series based on this one for Texas history, even though I'm talking about US history right now, because this one kind of bridges between the two. And this one is Why Annex Texas? And so the C3 inquiry, the way these series are built, they're built for students to analyze primary sources, but they're going to be analyzing them through a disciplinary lens. So we have our big driving question, which is, why should we annex Texas? And so we've got 4 groups here. We've got the history group, the civics, the economics, and the geography group. So the students start in their original group. And if you're doing a jigsaw method, you can look here, there's a background essay. So the kids will read this together. It's only about a 1-pager here, maybe a page and a half. The students will work together in their original group, and they'll read through this essay and they'll discuss and talk about it. Okay, here's some of the thoughts. Then you number them off, 1, 2, 3, 4. All of my ones go to the history group, two civics, so on and so forth. And then the students will gather in their new group, and they'll still be focusing on that big question of why annex Texas, but each group is going to have another compelling question to help guide them in their investigation. So which factor best explains why the United States annexed Texas, slavery or the spirit of manifest destiny? So that's the driving question for the history group. Then they're going to have 3 primary source documents. Each group is going to have 3, and they do have access to all 10 of them, or this one only has 9. Sometimes it's 9, sometimes it's 11, but most often it's 10. So they're going to have 3 primary source documents. So obviously there's going to be some overlap. But what you'll see is you have some background information on the document, the original document, and then you have an adapted version that just makes it a little more accessible for students that maybe struggle with some of the more complicated vocabulary. Then this one here, we've got, again, we're looking at more visual primary source right here. And then I guess it's more textual, but you've got the image to accompany that there. And again, the setup the same way. So we've got those 3 primary sources, and then another clip here, a secondary source to help support them in their investigation. And then the students are tasked with writing their own supporting questions. This lesson does continue where the students then have to write a claim. So they have to write their claim based on their lens specific driving question. But then they have to go out and they have to defend that claim by pulling in another primary source, not one of the ones they were originally tasked with. They have to look through the other ones to find one that would support the claim that they've written. They prepare a brief presentation and go back to their original group so that when you come back to your original group, you have perspectives from the civics group, which was looking more at James K. Polk. And it talked about, did this make the Democrats the party of slavery? Why or why not? And then you've got the economics question looking at the diffusion theory and talking about how was it good economically for the North and the South? Why or why not? And then, of course, the geography question focused on what factors help explain the strong desire of most Southern political leaders to annex Texas. So the kids all come back together, and when you have them all back in their original group, you're going to have the communicating results and taking action section, where the students then choose one of these to communicate back or to complete as their original group. So you've got all 4 perspectives in there for all 4 of those lenses to help contribute to this, and then a nice rubric to help the students understand what's expected of them. So that is called the C3 inquiry, and I highly recommend those. I love that series for US history. Just going back through again, talking about Atlas of US History, the C3, those are 2 that I've mentioned so far. I love the cases and controversies. You might want to check some of those out. I'm not going to go into those right now. Cases and controversies are really good. They're short primary source activities. Debating the documents. This is another fantastic one. It's kind of similar, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this. It's similar in some ways to the C3, but it's more kind of built around this idea of a debate and a discussion. So we've got, again, an introductory essay. It's real short, a timeline to help give some additional context. Then we have 2 sets of primary sources. Now, this is important to understand that you're analyzing these as sets. So documents 1 and 2 are paired together, and when the kids click on it, there are some questions down below dealing with context, bias and point of view, and drawing conclusions. So that higher level thinking types of questions is scaffolded right there. So we're looking at these 2 images here together. Then we're going to look at documents 3 and 4 together. And again, some background information on this here. And we're going to look at, we're going to look at these documents here. And the students, again, are going to answer new questions down below about these, recognizing bias and compare and contrast. After they've done that, this is where the debate steps in. So the students have to then select and answer this question: which of these primary source documents would be most useful to a historian trying to understand the transatlantic and East African slave trading system? So both sets of these documents could answer that. However, the students have to then back up their choice, documents 1 and 2 or 3 and 4. They have to then support and write down all of their reasons and back up why they chose those documents. And then the way I like to position this in my classroom is I might put two sides of the classroom and make them argue it out. Okay, so everybody that chose documents 1 and 2 over there, 3 and 4 over here, and then they have to convince me to their side. So that's a great way. That's a great series. So the debating the documents is a great one for that. The next series I'm going to talk about is this decision making. Decision making, these are really engaging activities, and you can find tons and tons of these. I think there are some that even fall, there's some for Texas history that are written specific for Texas history. And then there are some that branch over between Texas history and US history. But if we wanted to let's look at decision making, the end of the Jim Crow era. And so the way these are set up is students are given the vocabulary in advance, and then they're faced with a problem. And so they're put in the shoes of somebody in history, whether it's a specific person or somebody from a group of people. And so in this one, it says it's 1872 and you were a white Southerner in the Democratic Party. And so it gives some background information, and then the students are given a task here. Which option would you choose? Choose as many as you would like. And so you've got A, B, and C, 3 different options. But what I want to tell you about this is these sometimes have multiple layers to them. And so it's always good to check the teacher's guide over here and also look at the student handouts. And so this problem may actually have several layers to it. So it's good to just check these out. And what I like about it here, here's the first problem. What we don't give the kids are the actual outcomes. And so the reason we don't do that is because we want the kids to make the decisions without knowing what really happens afterwards, so that their decisions are not tainted by, what actually happened in history. And so right here, this continues with the actual outcome. So after the students make the decisions and lock them in, the teacher goes over this with them and talks about the different outcomes, which ones were chosen, and what actually happened as a consequence. What's neat about this one is there is another layer here that continues with an additional problem. So sometimes you want to take a look at some of these digital handouts here to look at later. This one here has the outcomes for that problem. And then there's another one yet with problems, and then the outcomes for that as well. And then sometimes, this one has actually another problem on it. And so you always want to check out those to see what's there. And they usually conclude with some type of primary source activity. And so this one is a speech from Booker T. Washington, and it has some great questions here at the end for analysis. So always check those out. Take a look at those in the decision making. You'll find a lot of really good activities there for those decision making. The next series I want to talk about for US history is, I really like these everyday life, and actually there's some good everyday life for geography too. Great documents in history is another good one to check out. History's Mysteries. I wish we had more for 8th grade US history, but there's a couple of those. Students are going to act as crime scene investigators. If you're looking for some short little primary source activities, these history unfolding are good ones. You can find some good ones for Texas history here too. And so like this one here, Outlaws and Other Characters. This has some short little, there's an introduction, a couple of little paragraphs with this, and then some images. This one shows like fur trappers. And then this one here is going to look at the miners. And then this last one is going to focus on the cattle trails. And so there was some background information on the document and some questions for the students to analyze when you click on the image. So you'll find a lot of these history unfolding for just some short little warm-up activities and to kind of, focus some of those discussions. Some other things I want to talk about going back. I left this one off for world geography. The issues today, I think, are phenomenal as well. There is a mapping US history, and coming soon, we're going to have a mapping Texas history. So you guys might want to check out the mapping US history. It's very similar to what we looked at for the mapping our world, but it focuses on the integration of geography and history together. So definitely check those out. Primary source activities, those are short little warm-ups as well for US history. The short texts in history are very good ones to check out as well. So I just wanted to kind of highlight some of those. And of course, there's some videos in here. We the People level text, whenever you guys talk about the Constitution, that has 4 different reading levels. So if you're looking for information on US government, that is a great resource. There's some really good readings in there and some activities to go along with it. But that one is more textbook centered, but it does have some really good ones in there. And the US History Readers is another super solid one for US history. So you might want to check those out. But going on to Texas history, I do want to point out some of the very specific ones. These Texas interactive mapping activities are going to be similar to what we saw with the desk atlas. So you're going to have some of these interactive types of things here where the students are going to have to do some dragging and dropping, some reorganization, if I hide the answers again. And so it may start off with just some multiple choice. Oops. And so the kids will just select some of these. And again, they can enlarge those maps. Some of these drop-down menus are going to be analyzing the timeline up there at the top, drawing conclusions, and then which of the statements here. And so this one here, they're dragging and reorganizing some of these. Just some great maps to help accompany those. And so some things you can check out here. And then this one, they're going to be doing some dragging and dropping with this. And this one has a reading passage and a map. So good practice for those star assessments when they've got the reading and map kind of paired together. Again, this one has a place where the students actually record themselves. So you might want to check some of those out. So those are the Texas interactive mapping. There is the Texas studies. It does have it is more textbook, but at the same time, there are some activities. The level 2 is your on level for Texas history in 7th grade. And so with this here, we've got our vocabulary to start with, and then we get into some of the cultures. There's going to be some big ideas to start with. And then you notice on the left-hand side, there's a vocabulary organizer. So these are foldable types of activities. There's a study guide here that's another foldable, and then famous Texans that the kids make and they can put into their interactive notebooks or anything that you use to, kind of collect all their note taking and things like that. There's another one under decision making. So if you go to Texas Studies, Texas Studies right here, and you do a quick little search, these decision making, these were all added this year. These are decision making in Texas history. Now you look at them, it's not just one lesson. There's actually multiple layers to them. Like the Stephen F. Austin one, you're going to actually have multiple problems. So we have a short version and a complex version if you wanted to differentiate for your lower level versus your more your on level or above level students with a complex. Then there's another problem here, Stephen F. Austin and American Settlers, and another problem with Stephen F. Austin disputes with Mexico and a primary source activity. So these are wonderful activities. And if you kind of introduce a unit with these where the students don't have any context of what happened afterwards, that can be really powerful because then they can make the decisions as if they were that person and then reflect through the teacher's guide has the actual outcomes that you can pass out or hand out or just discuss with your students in the class. Some other good ones for Texas history. Eventually when we have that mapping Texas history, when that comes in, that'll be a wonderful one. But there are some good ones for the Atlas of U.S. History, the C3 inquiry. There were a couple of good activities from that. And then also the key decisions in U.S. history. These have some great Texas history connections with that, some very specific to Texas. So you might want to check some of those out. There's like 150 of those key decisions in there. And there are a couple of mapping U.S. history lessons that blend very well or that work very well in Texas history. There's one on Spanish settlements, and there's one on annexing Texas, and another one on the Mexican-American War, and I think there's even one on cattle trails. So you might want to check some of those out and take a look in those mapping U.S. history. All right, I've talked very fast and covered a lot of ground. So what questions do you guys have for me so we can wrap up on time? Was this helpful, guys? Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up. Anybody have any questions? Feel free to unmute or anything you're looking for that you haven't been able to find yet. No.
So honestly, like honestly, like we've only taken bits and pieces of Active Classroom because we just didn't really know how to use it. So you showing us these this advanced search of the titles, series titles have been really helpful just to kind of even help us as Texas history teachers because it's just getting stuff that's not just textbook information.
Good. The one last thing I do need to show you guys, are you guys embedding things into a curriculum document? Okay, so check this out. This is really simple. All you have to do when you are on an activity, if you want to embed it in the document, all you have to do is grab the URL, copy and paste that. And now this is only for teachers. So if you copy the URL at the top of the screen when you're in an activity, you can embed that, and any teacher that clicks on that, it will open to that activity for the teacher. It does not work for the students. Students, you have to use the assign tool, which is up here in the top right-hand side, and that gives you an LTI link that you can embed. But if you were writing this for the curriculum, just grab these links at the top of the screen.
Nice. That's super easy and helpful.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining. I'll stick around for a couple minutes in case anybody has any questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.